And we are back with Kristian Ramos, our special guest. He's the founder and principal for Autonomy Strategies. You might have seen him on any variety of national news shows, in articles, newspapers. So, Kristian, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today to help our community and our viewers kind of better understand how we got where we are today and how we're going to move forward. Oh, I think
we have some microphone issues.
Well, let me unmute. Thank you so much for having me here, and I really appreciate you all taking the time to have this conversation. It's very important right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's go ahead and dive right in. You know, what were some of the major themes that we saw nationally in this election, and what do you think were kind of the deciding themes?
So I think there's three things that I would like to point to. You know, stuff that we saw before the election, stuff that we saw during the election, and then stuff after that I think we need to clear up. Number one, the economy was critically important to Latinos all over the country. The price of goods, the price of homes, of living situations was very important. Having said that, I think one of the things that is misinterpreted about what happened this cycle was that Latinos actually very much liked the policies that were put forward by Democrats. What they didn't like was that we didn't have a story about why they were experiencing what they were experiencing. We didn't have a reason for what they were experiencing at the grocery store or everywhere else. Donald Trump did have a story about what they were experiencing, and he was able to empathize in that way with enough Latinos that we were able to see a shift among those voters. And I think that's a critically important part of this conversation, because what we saw on election day is that there were a lot of Latinos and voters in general who said, I don't like Donald Trump. I like Kamala Harris more, but I'm still pulling the lever for Trump. I'm going to vote for him because I think he will lower prices, because he understands what is happening in my community and what's happening to me, and he'll do something about it. And so we had a lot of policies to fix these things, and I would argue we actually did lower prices considerably. We did not do that work of empathizing with the community in a way that made them understand that we got it, that it was corporations that were price gouging them, that it was the mega rich who were trying to divide us for their own gain. Those populist messages actually really work within the Latino community. They just didn't hear that from us enough. I'm not going to say that we didn't say this. Some people did. And some of the, it was in the campaign's rhetoric towards the beginning, but at the end, we didn't talk enough about that. And then finally, the last part I will say about the election, I think this is very important. Mass deportation and the anti-immigrant rhetoric is not popular with Latinos when they fully understand what it means. Work that we did with the Valiente Action Fund, work that we did with Way to Win, research found very clearly when you outline and you explain exactly what is going to occur in people's communities, they reject it. Mm-hmm. And that's something that sadly we're going to experience some version of that now. And I do think politically that is going to be disastrous for the Republican Party, because I don't think it's just Latinos who are going to be turned off by that. I think most voters, once they see what it entails, how much it costs, are going to reject it.
Right. Thank you, Kristian. What was the perception or the narrative when we're talking about economy and immigration? Our community has a high percentage working in constructions, farming, service. So if the Republican narrative was about like we're gonna increase or better the economy, but at the same time, affect immigration, what do you see that story going forward in 2025?
So I think, look, this is also something that is broadly misunderstood here. what Donald Trump did was he said to the older immigrants that are here, the newer immigrants that you are competing, and we're going to get rid of the newer immigrants. And then he said that will benefit you economically because you guys are competing against each other. And I think that was a persuasive argument to some of the other folks who had been in the country longer, unfortunately. And I think they are about to be in a rude awakening on that issue, because a lot of them think the people who have been here longer think that they're not going to be caught up in that. We heard in focus groups, we heard in conversations with people in the communities, that's the guy down the street. That's not me. I'm one of the good ones. They're gonna deport me. And so we're gonna see how that goes, unfortunately. And it is very scary that we're in this position currently.
Absolutely. And thank you for pointing that out. I kind of want to touch on the earlier point you made about a lot of the kind of populist rhetoric that we, saw, throughout this election cycle, especially from the Republican side. Right now, there seems to be a big debate between, within the Democratic ecosystem, right, about what Democrats could have done better, what messaging, how they should have changed their messaging. Do you see it as kind of more binary, as some of this debate seems to be, as the moderate wing versus the progressive wing, and one wing has more responsibility for the outcome of this election than the other? Or do you think it's more nuanced than that? What do you think Democrats need to do or change in order to, avoid more kind of, defeats like they saw on Tuesday?
So I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to go real big, and then we're going to get to what you're saying, okay? Because this is a big question.
Yeah.
Look, you have to look at how people actually voted this cycle, right? I see a lot of stuff on the internet. Oh, Latinos, swung the election for Trump. Da 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 da. Latino men make up 4% of the electorate, right? And they voted, depends on where you're looking, 50, 30, 55% for Trump. Women, white women, writ overall, are 40% of the electorate. They voted at 55%. White men are 35% of the electorate, 59% for Donald Trump. So there was a shift in the vote. I'm not going to say there wasn't, but it was not because of Latinos that we lost this election.
Right.
There was a broader story here that occurred, and I would argue that it was around the cost of living and so on and so forth. And I go back to this question of who's voting in these election cycles. There was a bet that was made that people in the suburbs, white women and white men, that we could bring them over to our cause here. And there was an effort to do that, but we have to figure out how to talk about the economy and these populist things in ways that resonate with Black, Latino, and white voters. If we had been able, and AAPI and all of these other groups that make up the coalition that the Democrats need to win. And so I don't think it's a left-right axis. I think it's are we speaking to the issues and the needs of the voters that we're trying to reach? And I think the commonality between each of those groups, right, white men, white women, Latinos, Black, all of those folks, is they were really pissed about the cost of living. Mm-hmm. And we didn't speak to that enough in a way that told the story of, here's why that's happening, here's what we've done, we have more to do. And so, absolutely, Georgia's economy is tied to immigrants and immigration, and that's a part of it, right? We have to keep all of those stories together, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think, I think it's doable. I think we can do that in the future, but it's going to take some thinking and some conversations. And I don't think there's any benefit in this this moderate progressive fight. We're on the same team, and we have to find a way to move forward together.
Absolutely. And, I think not to move already to the midterms to 2026, but we're going to have some very important elections in 2026, especially here in Georgia. We're going to be electing a governor. We're going to be electing a senator, whether that's Senator John Ossoff, who will be up for re-election, or whoever ends up opposing him. What would be your biggest recommendations or suggestions to Democrats on, how they, specifically to the Latino community, reach out to to constituents over the next 2 years, and in that, what kind of messaging would you hope to see in the 2026 midterms?
Well, don't back down. Our policies and the things that we stand for are popular. And I go back to the economy. We have to figure that out. But everything else we stand for, reproductive rights, civil rights, immigration, climate, fighting for a clean climate, that stuff is popular with voters, right? We have to communicate those things to voters. This is what we stand for. These are the good guys. These are the bad guys, and very clearly do that. And we can win. I'm convinced that Donald Trump is going to overreach in his first year. He's going to do mass deportation is going to be super unpopular. Tariffs are going to be super unpopular and raise prices. All of these things that he's proposing, he wants to get rid of the ACA. Those things are unpopular with voters. And if we do our work and we tell that story about how we're for these communities and not let them divide us, right? If we don't get into this war, these fights that I think folks are going to want to have, I think we'll be okay.
Yes, and I think to your point, we saw a lot of that. Maybe I don't know if cognitive dissonance is the word, but when especially swing states voted for Democratic governors or senators or representatives, but still overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. Could you maybe speak a little bit about that? Maybe why that is, and how that, how maybe we could see that in other swing states like Georgia?
Yeah, I think. Can you
rephrase?
So voters voted for Trump, but they did or did not vote for the lower ballot folks.
Right. I think what Marifer's talking about is Trump he swept all the swing states, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we saw a Democrat get reelected in Wisconsin. We saw Ruben Gallegos get elected in Arizona. So how do we square that? Because supposedly, I've read numerous articles over the last several years saying people don't split tickets anymore.
Right.
Obviously, that's not as true. So can you speak to that?
Gallego and Tammy Baldwin were both focused on cost of living issues. Mm-hmm. They were both focused on workers and the middle class. Their campaign was very, very focused on that from the beginning. And that was the difference maker. I do think the people who focused on the pocketbook issues, right, with their voters and clearly communicated that, were rewarded at the polls. People voted for them. And so I think the other piece here, to that end, we have to get closer to voters. We have to get to where they are. Look, immigration, people like immigrants. People like that, but we have to be full-throated in our defense and say, look, immigrants bring down the cost of living for everyone. Immigrants provide, cultural and economic things to our country, and we should embrace them, and we should find ways to create more legal pathways mm-hmm. to help them, not MAGA light stuff. That's not going to help us. Voters want to see differences. They want to see how you're different from the other side. So we have to be able to say, yes, we're pro-immigrant, and we want to find a way to help people contribute to this country, and we should create a legal and orderly process for people to enter the country. That's very popular stuff with voters, but we have to say it. And so that is also an economic argument that is persuasive to voters when we make it.
Yes, and I have heard many takes where people doesn't know that immigrants provide into the social security system without getting any of the benefits. So as you mentioned, there's a high percentage of positivity about that. We have about a few minutes. Any final messages, Kristian? Something that you personally or your organization are looking into 2025?
Look, I know that this was a terrible, awful election, and we are not in a good place. But I do see opportunity here to rebuild, to get stronger, to win these fights, because we have to.
Right.
And at this point, we have to be there for immigrant familia. We have to be there to make the case for a democracy and reproductive rights and how we're going to help workers. And I just, again, MAGA and what it stands for, when voters actually see it in practice, it's not going to look good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to be positive and be ready to take advantage of those moments to win in 2025. And I think we can, and I think we will.
Yeah, we definitely be here. Thank you again for your work on your organization here at Galileo as well. Do you have any social medias that you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, please follow me on Twitter at Ramos1841.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, Kristian Ramos. Thank you, Marifer. Thank you, Kyle. We'll be right back after this break.